We must be intentional about training men so that their mental strength rather is amplified. What they call toxic masculinity is really what we really need in society today. A knife as an instrument is not bad. It's only how it is used that determines if it's bad or good. The masculine trait in itself is not toxic, but it's only when it's dealt by an immature individual who is still struggling with a sense of insecurity and then has to bring others down just so you can feel important. That is when it's toxic.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Praise Arrow podcast. My guest today is Paul Cast. He is the creative director of Paul Cast Studios, which is a media production company with a focus on helping people live better lives through excellently illustrated stories. He is a movie director, screenwriter, and an executive producer. He graduated from Covenant University with a desire to use his knowledge of psychology in the creative space. He is also the author of the bestseller, How to Be a Man in a Crazy World, which is a comprehensive book on men and masculinity. He is the founder of Heroes Network, an annual men's forum with a record of over 1,000 young men who have been mentored to discover their purpose and live more meaningful lives. Paul has spoken on various platforms ranging from corporate organizations to schools and churches, and now it is my absolute honor to have him on today. Hello, Paul, and thank you so much for making it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delightful pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Right. I think we can start off by hearing a little bit about your story and what prompted you to write this book. Very interesting book, by the way. I learned so much just by reading about it. I've learned about men and how men think, and also some common misconceptions that people tend to have about men. So how did you get to that point where you decided that this was an important book to write?
Okay, fun fact. First of all, I never planned to be a writer ever. I'd never had it in my mind to write a book, let alone write a book. It was never something I thought about or dreamed of rather. So that it came out of a need. For a while, when I was in school, I made a lot of observations. The fact that there were so many avenues available for women to be mentored, groomed. There were women conferences, there were women outlets, and often you see ladies get together and they have conversations around very important issues that affected the woman. From physical health to reproductive health to spiritual growth and all of that kind of stuff, even career conversations as well. But there was almost nothing available for men. In fact, you notice, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as Men's International Day of the Man, or whatever it is called, until 2019. Imagine how interesting that must be. But you always have Women's Day at about at least 5 different Women's Day in one
Mother's Day, yeah, it's like crazy.
Yeah, Mother's Day, several Mother's Day, and Women's Day, Girls' Day, Girl Child Day. I didn't even know there was something as International Men's Day. So I saw that, the average man was expected to figure it out. There were no avenues for mentorship, for training of the man, or telling the man what being a man really was all about. So most men had to experiment and do a lot of make a lot of mistakes along the way. And so this man does not have an idea of what it means to be a man. He's going to be a father someday. And so he's just, and people had ideas as to what men were going through, and they tried to explain what it was. And 95% of materials written about men were written by women, interestingly. So I kept asking the question, what is available out there for men? And I almost didn't find any answer. I also had personal struggles too as a young man, because you have a lot of questions that you want answers to, and you don't necessarily have abilities to have this responded to. So I would go to some men I respected. I was like, I see you do this and do that, and it's phenomenal. I see how you raise your family. I see how you go about your life and all that. I want to be mentored in that area, because I didn't really have that opportunity with my dad, because my dad, for many years, we've not been together for a long time. So people often trivialize the role of a father in mentoring a young man. It's really, really very important role. So I wanted male figures I could look up to. So I would literally meet a man and tell them, I look up to you, sir, and I want to be mentored by you. I don't mind I don't mind having to, do menial things for you, like, washing your car, washing your clothes, whatever it is. I just want to have my mind, in a way, exposed to the right. Because I had a compromised perspective on how to see the world, how to see women, how to see life, what to expect, and how to channel my energy into what is right, what is wrong. So I needed that exposure. That made me kind of like, go asking questions. But almost all of them were busy. I couldn't blame them because they had their family to cater for. They had responsibilities to cater for. So you couldn't blame them for not wanting to have the time. So that necessitated the need to create an avenue, or for us to have an avenue where these issues can be taken and brought to the fore. So that made me. I've always been someone that whenever I don't see an opportunity, I like to create the opportunity. It doesn't matter if I don't have the experience, if I don't have the resources, whatever it is, I'll just go ahead and get it done. So when I didn't see that avenue, I just spoke to some friends of mine. I said, you know what, we don't have an avenue for men. Let's create one. And so we began to have meetings, and then we had our first Heroes Forum, and we had about 400 young men show up. It was amazing. The whole place, like, it was up to the gallery. People were there, only men.
And did you expect that?
Wanted only men available, not women. Come again?
Did you expect that turnout, of 400 men when you were planning the whole thing?
It was a funny story. In my school, we only printed one poster, literally one poster.
Wow.
Because we had when you have an idea at the beginning, people are excited about, let's get it done. But when it comes to getting it done, actually, a lot of times they withdraw and all stuff happen. And I don't blame them, because people don't really follow a vision; they follow results. I learned that from there, and from the very beginning. So you, as the visionary, it is your job to see the vision, to communicate the vision, but don't always expect loyalty to the vision at the beginning until you prove that the vision has merit, it has results. So I knew I had to, get my hands to the mud and get working. So we had planned to go to do ad campaigns, go from hostel to hostel, telling young men, why they should be part of this. So we had all those plans, but when it came to really getting it done, nobody showed up. I think none of my team members showed up to help out. So I took it upon myself to, work on everything myself, and just one of my friends. We would stay up all night making phone calls and all that kind of stuff. So the day of the event, I literally walked up to the venue, and it was quite a big venue. And I just walked in there. The hall was locked. I didn't know what to expect. And we only had advertised it once to the whole school once, and then only one poster was out. So I expected blatant failure. That's what I expected. I expected a terrible, maybe like 3 or 4 people, if God had mercy on them, 5 people to show up in that whole auditorium. But when we got there, it was start by 3 o'clock. I got in there by 1, and I just stayed there. I just sat down there, and I'm like, man, I don't know what's going to happen today. Then by 2:30, one person showed up. Before you know, he said, well, he wants to help with the ushering. He just showed up, and then before you know, by 3:30, the whole place showed up. It's like, okay. So it was like a dream. I was like,
wow.
I was like a dream. I couldn't believe my eyes. And so we're actually doing this. Wow. So, and we planned to spend about 3 hours there, according to our plan, our program, our routine, competition, all that. But we spent about 5.5 hours in there, because the guys didn't want to go. It was an avenue for vulnerability. There's so many questions that were brought to the fore, so many things at the point. Because we were having things recorded on camera. I was telling you what, cut the camera. Let's have guys be vulnerable. And so some of the guys were amazing. Some were crying in the rooms, or getting so emotional, because these were things they wish they could talk about, pressing issues that nobody was willing to bring to the fore. So that's what inspired after I'd seen that happen, I suddenly need to continue doing this. And so I woke up one morning, and I heard the words in my heart, how to be a man in the crazy world. And I just started putting pen to paper and began to write. That was how it came about. It was never an intentional movement. It was something that happened along the way. So going forward. So that's how the whole idea for the material came out.
That's lovely. And you mentioned something while you were talking. You talked about not having that clear example of a father figure in your life and how you try to seek that out for yourself. So in your work so far, talking with men, talking with older men, the different figures in your life, what have you? And I know you also talked about it in the book. I wanted us to highlight more about the role of fathers in the lives of men. And if possibly in the lives of women, that's not the focus of the book, but if you know a little bit about that, you could also highlight that as well, what you think is the role of fathers in general.
Fathers are very, very important. Very, very important. I mean, I love my mother to death. I love my mother. Mothers are phenomenal. Mothers are so important. But the role of a father is so, so important. Not necessarily because of the parenting role exactly, but because a father is the first introduction to what the expectation of the male role really is for the man.
Yeah.
I say this all the time. Why it's important to have both the father and mother is this. A mother provides unconditional love for children, but a father needs to provide conditional love. The boy needs both the unconditional love of his mother and the conditional love of his father. This is what I mean by that. Now, a mother can love you whether you do right or do wrong. She in class, you're still her daughter. I mean her son rather. She would always have a little overlap all of that. But for the father, he brings the balance of you having to earn certain things. Like certain things you're not going to just sit on your couch and just expect things to fall in your lap as a man. You'll have to get out there and get things done. And so it brings that, because a lot of times people are pushed to one extreme. Like when you are only exposed to unconditional love and don't have the balance of expectations, you tend to expect the whole world to be that way. So you go get on a job because the job is difficult. They don't pamper you. They don't butter you up, tap you on the back all the time. You just feel like they are treated that very unfair, so you want to quit. Then also, there's another extreme of being too driven towards the expectation of performance all the time, that you don't have the balance of showing grace to yourself and all that kind of stuff. So, in fact, the start is very clear. Fatherless children have a higher tendency of being incarcerated in prisons, or being inmates in prisons. Fatherless young men have the highest dropout rates in school, highest health risk, highest possibility of falling into drugs and all kinds of vices. And mainly those vices are simply responses to a vacuum that's there, which is supposed to be filled up by the father. So absentee father absence is such a brutal thing, because, for example, even for the girl as well, the highest pregnancy cases, teenage pregnancy cases, are a result of fatherlessness for girls. So people tend to tilt towards, because there's something about a young man, even a young lady as well, that desires the love of a male figure, and that's what the father provides. The affirmation she needs to be told that she's beautiful, she's a queen, and all that kind of stuff. And like it or not, she needs it. And that's what the father is supposed to provide for her coming up. And when that is not available, she often would want to trade her, compromise just to get that affirmation, and then she falls into the wrong hands by going, you meet a male figure out there and he wants your body just so he can, it gives you what you think you need. It gives you love, quotes, by affirming your word and taking something else in return. So you want what he gives you. You want the affirmation, and so you give something else. That's you compromise your dignity for that purpose. So that's why, having a father is so important. The father is that introduction of what it means. I say this all the time. Sons are like mirror. Sons are like mirror. Whatever you show in front of them is what they reflect back to you. So if he's shown irresponsibility, that's what it reflects back. And if he's shown responsibility and dignity, that's what it reflects back. I had a woman one time read my book. She had She was in her 60s, and then she had a son, which she had groomed for many years, and then she was divorced from her husband. And so, because of how pained she was about what he had done to her, she wanted to keep the boy away from him because she felt it was going to be a bad influence on the son. But in my book, I mentioned the fact that a man may not have been a good husband, doesn't mean he can't be a good father.
Yeah.
And every son needs their father. And so when she read that, she broke into tears because for years she had kept the man away from the son. And then the son began to develop some kind of weirdness about his social interaction and all that. He just didn't know how to manage relationships. And so he blamed her for that because he did not have that opportunity of seeing that in her father, because she kept keeping him away from him. So the father role is so. In fact, when people talk about all kinds, there's so many social constructs that are brought to the fore. But if you look at it fundamentally, you look at the core of the motivation behind some of these things is due to the lack of it's due to father absence, basically. So a lot of things are like, it's really, the stats are really glaring. In fact, we see it, it's amazing to see how like 3 times kids who actually do not have their fathers are 3 times more likely to commit suicide. They're 70 times more likely to end up in prison. Even though some have ended up incredibly well and done phenomenal things with their life, like for example, Barack Obama, for instance, did not have his father around. But that chance is usually very slim, and it's more difficult. It's a lot more difficult. It takes a lot more intentionality and having to rewire your brain again, your mind to, to see what you need to do, take responsibility for yourself. But we cannot take out the importance of fathers in the home when it comes to raising children, both the boy and the girl.
Okay, so since we're talking about fathers, by the way, I love how you highlight that fathers are mirrors, because many people, especially these days where there are a lot of single parent homes, a lot of mothers raising kids on their own, people tend to celebrate those mothers, and it's not like they should not be celebrated. They're doing amazing. I know it's difficult. Not that I know how it feels because I haven't been there, but I know it's difficult to raise a child on your own. It's a very crazy experience. And yes, they should be celebrated, but people confuse celebrating the people with celebrating the idea of, single parent homes, that people forget that this is actually not healthy, and there will be lasting effects on the child that you can actually see. And that's why the stats that you mentioned are very important, because when you start talking with people, they might say, oh, this person just had one parent, they turned out fine. But it's good to look at things objectively. How is this playing out in the real world? And yeah, I really appreciate that you highlighted that. So since we're talking about fathers, let's talk a little bit about the patriarchy. So in the book, you highlighted how the world has changed following the World War, and how we got to this point where everyone is trying to say, okay, men and women are equal in the home, the roles are the same. And I'm not talking about being equal as human beings. Of course, we're equal as human beings, but then people are saying roles should be equal in the home. There's absolutely no difference. And I want to know why you think the patriarchy lasted for so long. What just talk about your general ideas on that period versus this period, and what the transition we've gone through, the effects, all of those things. Yeah.
It's very interesting because this is even an issue in the first place. It's actually very interesting because fundamentally, I often hear that argument all the time. Men and women should be equal in the home and all that stuff. And I get where they're coming from, because usually, if you have studied history, you realize that when there's been a narrative that has gone for so long and makes people feel like minority, when they often are able to have some level of liberation, they tilt to the other extreme.
Yes.
Same with racism, feminism movement, that all came out of disgruntled sense of that unsettlement about someone we cases in the past. But even that was not accurately communicated and portray. If you really study, like I had this argument, we had a debate one time. I was part of a debate, national debate one time, and they talked about feminism. And I began to dig into the history of feminism. I realized that actually, it wasn't what we are saying now. We're not having the same conversation actually. Um, so, and a lot of time people make inferences based on inaccurate information about, so I call it self-imposed victimization sometimes. Yes, it was true. I'm not saying that it wasn't true that we had those cases in the past, but we had taken it to our extreme. When it comes to the home, it's clear. I think I had a story one time about a woman who was saying that she was equal with her husband. And so she came in one time, and then and then I think by 3 a.m. there was a knock on the door, heavy knock on the door by robbers. And then he said, husband should go check it out. And he was like, I thought men and women were the same. You go check it out. So a lot of time it's as a result of hurts that people have had in the past, they've had, and instead of actually seeking therapy and seeking some level of healing, they respond to hurt by tightening their fists, communicating strength. And strength is often seen, they communicate as, being more aggressive, being more tough and all that kind of stuff. A strong woman by being more angry, by being more resolute. In fact, one time I went for an event, a women's event one time, and the amazing, brilliant professor she was talking, and I was really mesmerized by the whole idea, by what she was talking about. So after the event, I went up to her and said, that was an incredible presentation. That was phenomenal. And then I kind of like introduced myself to her. And then I offered, she had 2 bags with her, one heavy bag she was holding, and normal lady's bag she was holding. Then I offered to help her with the big bag she was holding. It was a laptop bag or something. It was kind of bulging. Then she said, don't do that. And I said, don't do what? She was like, don't carry my bag. And I said, why not? She said, don't you know when you carry a woman's bag, you're trying to make her feel second place.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was re-educated right there. But a lot of times it's actually as a result of hurt, as a result of issues they've gone through in the past, maybe from wrong relationships and wrong or let's say even seeing their parents as well, maybe father absence or trauma from their childhood. And so they project this as them being strong women or strong people by wanting equality in the home. But even that is not even possible because biologically speaking, we are different. Now, inequality is not that it's not that you are second place to me or you're on them per se, but just that we have different roles. In the body, a head has to be a head, the neck has to be a neck. It doesn't mean that the head is superior to the neck. If I take off my neck, the head is useless. If I take off other parts of my body, it's useless. So he's not necessarily referring to the level of is if you're part of a military, if you're part of a squad, you need to have a leader who's going to give commands. If you don't have a leader and everybody is a leader, we're all going to go in different directions. So it's about functionality. And if you are wanting to be married, I tell some people all the time that if you feel you can't handle the responsibility of having a role in, just don't get married. Be single, be your own woman and all that kind of stuff. Be your own person, But if you're going to marry someone, you have to marry someone that you can respect, someone you can actually count their leadership. You're part of a community. You want to be sure you're part of the community. You can respect leadership that's there. It doesn't mean that you are subservient. Just simply means in functionality, someone has to take the role of leading. And so that narrative that's really going on, and it's really a lot of people are victims of it. So I will mention this popular figure that said, she's not marrying kind, she's not trying to submit to a man, that kind of stuff. But popular, TV, television figure, I say this, you don't, as a person, you don't pattern your life after someone that you only see on the screen.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what happens off camera. People who show up on the screen, a lot of times the shows are scripted. They are trained to be communicators, to not to really mask their emotions and then show you what is presented on camera. And then you now, from your own house and your own village and your own place, You want to now pattern your life after someone you're only seeing on the screen. And it happens that this lady that you're talking about happens to to have a man in her life, but she's just not married, to the person. And then you don't know what happens in her bedroom when she's on her pillow, how often she cries, and all that kind of stuff. It's really difficult to, we celebrate isolation, just I'm my own person, I'm my own whatever. We celebrate it, but we don't really understand how difficult it really can be to be older and to be low. When you're young, you have all the strength in the world to do whatever you want to do. I can go where I want to go. I can make all the money I want to make. But when you really are older and your back is sore and then you're swollen up, and then, the money almost means nothing because the money won't come around you to circle around you when you're in the hospital. I was at the hospital to see my friend one time, and I saw this man across from me at a ward across from me, and the man was surrounded by his family, his wife and children. Right now, it was amazing to me because he was surrounded by his wife and children. I didn't see his car there surrounding him. I didn't see his bank account surrounding him. I didn't see his houses surrounding him. I didn't see all the accolades that he had achieved, all through his life surrounding him. At the end of the day, we celebrate isolation. I'm my own man, I'm my own whatever. But people who dwell in community live longer. People who dwell in community live healthier lives. They are better in person than people who are lonely, isolated, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we often are portraying right now. Strong people who are by themselves. I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't submit to anybody. And we just keep on replicating all kinds of, hurtful people back and forth. And so I get what the argument is they are trying to say by the idea of equality, but what they are not saying is that they are simply projecting how they feel in what psychologists would call denial or sublimation. This is the first self-defense mechanism where you just, instead of you accepting the reality and dealing with it, you just simply project it in a different kind of way. So it's unhealthy. It's brutally unhealthy. It's something that should not be encouraged. Of course, I'm not saying you shouldn't get off toxic environment and all that. But I'm saying that fundamentally we need each other. We need to actually understand that our rules do not make us any lesser, but rather for the functioning and the steering of the course of the family, or for us to actually coexist and do better, we must recognize our roles and stick to them and do them incredibly well. And that's how we're going to get there.
Right. And when you talked about people and toxic relationships, I remember that for a lot of people, the reason why the patriarchy, or the reason why men in general have been labeled as so terrible, is because of the things people have been through. So yes, there were times when women were so confined that they didn't have a say in anything. And, as a lady, you were basically, you basically moved from being a property of your father to being a property of your husband. And you had really no say in all of that. And those were rules that in general didn't favor women, because it's like, if something were to happen, they didn't have a say in how the rest of their lives would go. And for a woman who happened to fall into the hands of a terrible man as a husband or as a father, her life was basically done for. And that's what people fought against, for that freedom for women to choose how their lives would go. Now, we're at a place where women in general do have that freedom, but the narrative that has been sold about men is still persisting. I mean, women then who had great fathers and who had loving husbands didn't really complain much about this, because, they hadn't been exposed to the woes of those women who were living miserable lives. But what we see today is people in general assume that, if you were to submit to the leadership of a man in the home and say, okay, yeah, I trust your judgment, then that's like, oh, you're crucifying yourself, you're giving up yourself. I don't think it's a wise thing for a woman to put herself in a position where, from the start of her life, okay, she's just waiting around. Like, okay, I'm just waiting around for someone to marry me and just, take care of me my whole life. I mean, even in today's world with the labor market, it's not a wise choice because previously what the salary that a man earned, like one person earned, used to be sufficient to take care of the whole family, take care of your wife, take care of your kids, buy a house. But now, with just the salary from a single person, unless it's a really, really high-paying job, it's going to be difficult to get all these necessities, which is one of the impacts of, women coming fully into the workforce, because now we're paying less for labor. If you have the workforce, people are going to have to pay more because labor is going to be more valuable. But with so many women in the workforce now, it's like it's more difficult to get a job, and it's more difficult to get a high-paying job as well. Nothing against women being in the workforce. I'm just clearly stating the impacts of where we've come to so far and something people should be aware of. And then I also wanted to talk about how people how people see just women as the victims of everything that has happened so far. I mentioned that we would talk about why you think the patriarchy lasted so long. And you talked about wars. People forget that at that time, men were the ones who went to war. And so, yes, they had a lot of the voting rights. They had a lot of this. They had the major say in a lot of things, but that was because they were the ones who did most of the tasking jobs, like even till now, although people say we want equality, I'm like, not really, because if you go to construction sites, you don't see a lot of women, and nobody is saying, oh, we want more women on construction sites, because people realize that a lot of these jobs are really men's jobs. We don't have the same physical strength. And no, I'm not competing to have the same physical strength. When I was little, I used to compete a lot with my brothers. Like when they used to work out, especially my immediate younger brother, when he would be working out, I would, pick up something heavier and try to meet up with that strength level. I mean, it worked for some time, but after a while, you just realize, okay, the strength is not the same. It's not the same at all. Yeah. And you can, if you have a good life, if you have a great father, a great loving father, a great family, you're also married to a loving husband, there is no need for you to try to do all the things a man can do. So this is just a response to women. This is a response from a lot of women who have been hurt, and then they raise their daughters saying, okay, don't depend on the man. You should be strong. You should be independent. You should be able to do everything on your own and all of that. And I've also seen that in my home. My mom is kind of masculine in nature, not completely, but she's a very, very strong-headed woman. And that's because, she grew up, lost her father at some point, and, didn't also have her mom around her all the time. And she had to be strong for herself. And she did amazing with, she did an amazing job with the cards that life dealt to her. But I can also see how that experience has impacted, her psychology of life and how independent you should be. So for a long time, and probably even till now, I have that mindset of, okay, you need to work hard on your own. But I'm also learning more to depend on other people as well, just understand that people can help you, and, that's fine. It's a part of life. So the part that you mentioned about community, that's a great point. Can I just point out this thing from the book? I'm just going to try to find it. I think it was a quote from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton said something about, so about men and women and highlighting women as the victims of war. I found it really funny. So I'm just going to start from your quote and then go to Hillary Clinton. So you said, the world we live in is ruthless towards men, intolerant of their weaknesses, and turns a blind eye to when he cries for help. Hillary Clinton once said in the First Ladies' Conference for Domestic Violence in El Salvador, held in 1998. That's when I was born. That's such a long time ago. So she says, women have always been the primary victims of war. Women lose their husbands, their fathers, their sons in combat. Malcolm Turnbull, the Prime Minister of Australia, said, women are disproportionately the victims of war. And I was like, okay. They lose their sons, they
It was
lose
funny
their
to me.
fathers.
Like
I mean, like, okay, so the people who died, aren't they victims as well? So,
they're not
I mean,
victims.
it's really funny. I get that. Yes, at the end of a war, you have women who are fatherless, who are without their sons. In fact, I've watched so many movies about this, and it's very heart wrenching to see. But you should also share some sympathy for those who give their lives to protect their families at the front lines. And yeah, I didn't feel that that was communicated at all in this quote. So why do you think we've gotten to that point where there is such little?
What's funny to me about
Yeah.
that quote was that, well, the fact that the word that actually got me there was the word primary victims. It would have said, if I said it was women are victims. Oh, we understand that, but the fact that it was primary in a way trivialized the sacrifice that was being done. Like when people tell me about equality and all that, I'm not you definitely do something and you should be paid what you're worth. And mostly, a lot of time the argument is always from the place of convenience. Like when we have convenient jobs, like
Yes. Yes.
director or whatever. But what about the uncomfortable jobs? Like for instance, the man who takes care of the sewage, who has to climb a pole to, fix the light, and men who expose themselves to hazards like radioactivity and all that kind of
Like
stuff.
minors, for example.
So I'm like, so what about equality in that area as well? So it's always a selective equality when it's convenient, and I also give, because to be honest, I'm not turning a blind eye to the fact that women are treated unfairly when it comes to the workplace.
Yeah.
That their gender is a problem. They are not, but that's not always the only bias there is, because people often, would take this narrative, and then when they are not, let's say you are not given an opportunity, not feel because you're a woman, that's why that is happening. But this I always say, every single human being has a bias. We all have biases. I have a bias. You have bias. There are certain people group you may not want for certain things to be done, right? No matter how we see it, the certain demographic may not necessarily want. And so if I have a company, and then in that company is a private entity, I fund it with my money, I make the sacrifice for it. There are certain things I would want in there. And of course, it's unfair of me to say, I don't want a woman here, or I don't want a woman over there. So, but if as a person who comes to work in that organization or that entity, you didn't build that organization, you're coming to be part of it, right? And if they are saying they don't want you in this place, just go where you be needed, go where you're celebrated, or not where you're tolerated. The idea of saying that I don't have what I want because I'm a woman makes in a way, that excuse actually often makes women feel like victims, and which is not right. I shouldn't have to have my daughter feel like a victim. She should feel like she's powerful enough to do whatever she wants to do, and to take responsibility for her own self. It's empowering to know that I can take responsibility for myself and not have to excuse or to feel like because you don't give me an opportunity at the table, that's why I don't have a seat. No, if I don't have a table, I'll bring my own chair. I'll create my own table and sit on it, right? That's one thing. So it's that balance of realizing that, I call this self-imposed victimization a lot of times for a lot of people who do not really understand narrative. So I feel like let's get the conversation up. If you want to let's have equality across all boards. Let's have equal amount of women also in hazardous jobs as well as men. If that's but again, it's not even meant to be a competition at all. It's meant to be that we have a complementary relationship. Women are powerful. Women are beautiful. Women are wonderful. You are great at your role. You are only the best when you are yourself, your best self. And I think it's insulting to want to make women like men, because it's degenerating. It's degrading to have a woman have to relieve herself of who she is to try to be something she's not, just to appear strong and all that kind of stuff. You are great when you are yourself, and you are at your best when you are your real self. And that's what we need to rather communicate of saying, you know what, you have to be this and that. And so I just thought about chipping that in the
Yes, and I think this idea of wanting to make women and men equal on every front is also facilitated by the opinion that everything that has happened so far has happened as a result of the manipulation of the patriarchy. For example, people like to assume that the only reason why there are so few women in certain roles is because the men wanted it that way. And so if we mandate a 50-50 hiring rate across all roles, then we will see that we're going to get the best results possible. And that's absolutely not true. I was at a conference where the participants had a debate, and they were like, should we have 50-50 employment rate? Should it be mandated by the government? And I said, I don't think the government has any business doing that. If for some time you decided, okay, because we've seen that this has been the case, then we think all companies should at least have maybe 10 to 20%, like all maybe major companies in these fields should at least have maybe 10 to 20% women involvement, so we can make sure that that women are not being left out. That's kind of understandable because we know that we're coming from a place where women have not been included so much. And maybe you're trying to avoid some kind of bias from companies. But still, to get it up to 50-50 and say that that is absolutely mandatory, I think you're going to just bring more harm than good. Let's take the role of nurses, for example. Nursing is disproportionately a female role. And why is that? That's because more women have agreeable personalities. It doesn't mean that there aren't agreeable men. There are a lot of agreeable men, but there are far more agreeable women than there are agreeable men. And that ability for compassion is more present in women, and it is not a social construct. And people argue so much that this compassion that comes with women is just a social construct. But then research shows that in more egalitarian societies, you actually have more women tending towards those traditionally feminine roles and more men tending towards those traditionally masculine roles. And that's because now that they've been given the freedom to choose what they want, you actually find more people tending towards these things that we felt were only a product of bias. So what does that prove? That proves that it's not just a social construct. There are things in us that make us tend towards, some kind of roles. It doesn't mean that females should not be engineers. It just means you shouldn't decide, okay, if the line isn't exactly at 50-50, then it means that the patriarchy is up to something and, we should fight for it. So yeah, that's just the idea I had about that. I don't know if you also have anything to add to that.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. When we, if you leave people to themselves, they would often, even in school, when it comes to school, like nobody tells women what courses to go for. Nobody tells men what courses to go for. But you always realize that engineering courses often have more men than women. And, then more humanistic courses like, maybe psychology, HR, and those more relational, social courses have more women there and nobody actually says that only women should be here. Not because there's something about a woman that nurtures, that's all about, that endearment. And that's something that the world really needs. That level of nurturing, that care, that compassion, that kindness, that generosity that we often do not see. And that's why mothers, that's what mothers give to children naturally. A mother is endearing, she's kind, she's, all that. And that's, women naturally have that. Men often have to be taught to be compassionate. We have to be taught to have the balance because we are exposed to, at first, as fundamentally as men, we're competitive. One know who can outbeat the other, outdo the other. And that's what strengthens us to defend what's our own and to defend the family. I put it in the book that prior to now, many years ago, men were mostly hunters, and women were they were the ones to make something out of what men hunted. Like when a man would go out there to hunt for game, like hunt for animals, and he would bring it home for the man to cook and all of that kind of stuff. So he had to exercise his ability and prowess to make sure he goes and gets the kill, so his family can have something to eat. So if he doesn't fulfill that role, she can't fulfill her role. So you see how complementary our relationship really has become. So, but people right now are now trying to force the narrative that women should now switch roles and then, be more masculine and be all of that. They are trying to, they say that women were taught that, but now they're not trying to teach women how to, behave. And I feel it's insulting for a woman to be told, that she has to relinquish her natural disposition to be kind, to be compassionate, all that kind of stuff, just so she can appear strong. And we often would interpret strength as, being more aggressive, being more whatever. That's not strength. Strength is simply the ability to be yourself amidst precarious oppositions or, circumstances that try to force you to not be that. If you see someone, I heard this story told by Sarita Jakes, that's TD Jakes' wife. She was having an argument with him one time. She doesn't really talk that much. She's very calm. So he was, he's the talker. He was like, he was talking at her, and then she was like, "You're not going to talk to me like that." So she now walked out and got into the car. I was about to drive off. Then he now came outside and said, "Are you going to? You're not going to take my car and get away from here. You're not going to." So he was, going up and down. And then she just came out of the car, took the key, turned the car, then walked. How she was very majestically walked into the house and sat down and said, "Thomas, do whatever you want to do." So she was very calm. Her calmness, in a way, demonstrated strength. And that made him to now realize, oh, okay, I need to get this right. So it's not always aggressiveness that demonstrates strength. Sometimes that ability to just be, to be calm is also is an incredible level of strength. So I think women should, if you are anything other than yourself, you are not yourself anymore. And that defeats the whole aim of being who God actually called you to be. So, so I think, the whole narrative from, the what we call the misogynistic era, the patriarchy and all of that, people actually had happier lives. If we're going to look at the reality of things, people were happy. So with all of our education, all of our aggressiveness, we still are lonely. We still have the highest level of suicidal cases in our time, the highest level of vices and crime and all kinds of stuff, with all of our education, all of our exposure, with all of our stuff, because we are we're switching roles, and in so doing, we're not. If things are out of place, it's bound to be chaos all the time. I'm not for the night. Everybody has to be married. As you have to marry a woman to be a woman. No, you're a woman. You're a woman first before any role you take on. Whether you are a wife or you're a daughter or whatever, you are not defined by those things, right? You are fundamentally an individual, a person of worth, right? If you decide to be married, that's your decision to make. If you decide not to be married, it's also good and fine. So being attached to someone does not make you a person. You are a person first before anything else that you choose to do. So that out of the way. But if you now do decide to be that, it's important that you realize that it's only in playing roles that we're able to be effective. So whether you choose to be married or not doesn't change your value, worth as an individual. But however, if we must submit ourselves to our entity, we must be able to, play according to the role to treat our individual responsibilities, basically.
Okay.
So this whole narrative, this whole thing that we're just throwing up and down, trying to, in a way, walk. we call the rather our definition of being woke is that we're actually being sleepy and and not being effective. So it's not working.
And also, I don't think we haven't done this long enough to have comprehensive data on how this is going to go. I know everyone likes to pretend, not everyone, well, we might like to pretend like we know that definitely with more women than men in a lot of roles, because people have been like, all the wars that happened because we had men in power, and if it were women, it wouldn't be like that. And I'm like, well, if you ask individual women, a lot of women don't even trust themselves. Like, there's so many fights that go on between women And I'm like, if you were in power, let's say you were in power and this other person was in power, I think, everything would have burned to ashes by now. I'm not saying that women can't be in power. I'm just saying that even when you bring it down to the smallest unit of the smallest human unit, that's like, individual to individual relationships, we see less of this friction between men than we do between women. So I think it's very illogical to assume that if you replace all the men with women, then suddenly everything would be, perfectly aligned. And now, talking about men, there's this thing you said in the book where people are confused about what it means to be a good man versus what it means to be a real man. So if you ask someone, what does it mean to be a good man? People mention traits like, being kind, being responsible, and all of these things. And then when you ask what it means to be a real man, people are like, strong, aggressive. So that dichotomy, I think, has left a lot of men confused, especially today when it seems like all the masculine traits are suddenly seen as toxic masculinity. So you try to be, to show that you are strong and can help someone out, and they feel like you're trying to put them down because you're exhibiting toxic masculinity. And then when you act so calm, compassionate, or even feminine, people feel that should be celebrated because you are breaking the narrative. And then when a woman asks, acts masculine, people feel that should be celebrated because she's breaking the narrative. And what this is doing is leaving both girls and boys confused, because now it's almost as if for a majority, and it still remains a majority, for a majority of people, being themselves it's now suddenly somewhat toxic. And so let's start with men, or let's just focus on men. What does it mean to be a good man and a real man, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I think they are both the same thing. They are really both the same thing. We all, a professor actually made that experiment. Just asked that question in class. What does it mean to be a good man? We're saying, must be kind, responsible, and compassionate, all that kind of stuff. And then when he said, another column, you asked, what does it mean to be a real man? And then, like you mentioned, talk about being strong, aggressive, all that kind of stuff. So we came up with the idea of toxic masculinity. I often ask the question, what makes masculinity toxic? And there's now a movement to it, a feminization of men. They call it the effeminization of men, making men more, compassionate, more kind, and more loving, and all that kind of stuff. Like literally teaching men to do those things. And they have the right idea, but they just don't have the right strategy. And they often, you would think that that's what it means to be a man, to be, all those things. Now, I'm not putting out the importance of kindness and love and care, compassion, all that kind of stuff. Those are really wonderful traits for any man to possess. However, it must be balanced with the trait of mental strength, physical and mental strength. It's important for a man to be strong, to be able to defend his territory. Because one of the issues we're having in the world today is as the result of the lack of masculinity. I call it active masculinity. A lot of time we're celebrating passivity over activity, our activeness. So things are happening around and just let it slide. People can come and, they step on your toes, or they come and, take over your country, and then they push wrong narrative, push terrible narrative about you. Like what's happening in the US right now, children who are being indoctrinated into gender confusion and all that kind of stuff. And so certain social constructs are being amplified, and people are just quiet about it. Now, if you see in movies, the movie industry, movies right now, they showcase fathers as very passive, just sitting around and saying nothing, while the whole family just going crazy. Wow. Fundamentally, the main issue is the issue of men not stepping to the fore, men not taking active leadership responsibility and role. So, if there is it has to be that when there's a man in the house, there is a level of safety that the family feels, that the wife, the woman feel, children feel, because there is a man in the house. And so when we're raising men now to be very soft and you don't stand up for anything. You don't have anything you're standing for. You don't have any value system that you can defend with your life, And so a lot of things just go bad and go wild, So men have to be strong. They have to teach boys to be strong, to be tough certain times. They should, teach them to actually stand up for themselves, stand up to the fore, and be able to air their opinions and, challenge status quo, challenge ideas that, in a way, are conflicting with the right values and value system that should be portrayed and celebrated. So like I said before, vices persist in society when men become passive. So imagine that, the wars that were fought and the men they were not trained to, to defend themselves or defend a country. They would have just been taken over. They would destroy the whole country because these men are not, there's no man out there to defend and fight in the war. That's what happens when it comes to everything else. So if men are just just there to be passive and, feminized in a way and don't ever get to be strong, it affects everything else. So like that, so being a real man and being a good man is the same. You have to be a man. Just to be a man. Being a man means you should be a good man, right? You should stand up for what is right. You should protect your family. You should defend your family. You should be there for those. Be there for your family. Be a good person. Maintain a sense of morality. Your value system your standards should be high as an individual. Discipline yourself, because you really cannot lead yourself. You can't lead others. We have a lot of people who are wanting, expecting subservience and wanting to lead others, but they haven't led themselves. So you must lead yourself, take responsibility for yourself first. Then you now earn the right to now want to take responsibility for anybody else. So like you mentioned about, these narrative that's going on in the world today. Like I said, the fundamental thing is simply that we don't have men stepping up to the fore anymore. We don't really have the men who are standing up for what's right anymore, as we should, because they've been, quote, feminized. Yet just be in the background and then not just take active role and responsibility and all that kind of stuff. So if we must be intentional about training men to put men in some tough situations so that their mental strength is amplified, their emotional tenacity, because we need that tenacity. What they call toxic masculinity is really what we really need in society today. Because I see it all the time. A knife as an instrument is not bad. It's only how it is used that determines if it's bad or good. A knife in the kitchen is used for cutting onions, for cutting the tomatoes, and is used for cooking. But a knife in the hands of a murderer, is an instrument of destruction. So the knife in itself is not bad. But what knife is used for determines if it's bad or good. So the same thing, the masculine trait in itself is not toxic. But it's only when it's dealt by an immature individual who is still struggling with a sense of insecurity and then has to bring others down just so you can feel important. That is when it's toxic. But if that same trait is used in defending a country, let's say these thieves were to break into my house and I defend myself and my wife and my family by bringing that guy down, maybe shooting in the leg or tying him up, right? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But imagine if I was not strong enough to do that, then that would have been me exposing my whole family to all kinds of danger. So men actually need to be strong, fundamentally.
Yes. And sorry. When you talk about men being strong, and I noticed that there are two types of strength. And when you ask people about what it means to be a good man, people automatically talk about the mental strength. When you ask some people what it means to be a real man, they immediately think about the physical strength. And both are very necessary. But what has happened is people are sort of demonizing the physical strength aspect of it. But people, let's say ladies internally, still want to be around a man who is strong and around whom they can feel protected, despite the narrative going around. And what that has led to is a large portion of women who fall prey to men who externally are strong. They bear these qualities of strength, but they lack the character aspect. And so the good men, or those ones who should have also trained themselves up to appear strong and appear as having the ability to be responsible and take care of a woman, they have fallen prey to focusing more on just their maybe character, trying to be nice. And actually being too nice all the time is not necessarily a good thing, because then you let people push you around. And if you're the head of a home and you let people push you around, that's going to lead to them also pushing your family around. So you need to also be firm. So women, when they see men who are firm, appear physically strong, sometimes they might assume that, yeah, this is a man I would want in my life. And then they get into that relationship, and this man lacks the traits of kindness, care that should come with a father as well. And you see so many women being subject to abuse. And that's why people say that, bad guys always get the good girls because these women are not able to differentiate between what appears to be the external ability to be protective from the internal ability to actually care for someone, be a father, and be a good husband. So I'm just saying this to encourage men to not be afraid to appear strong, not be afraid to appear as having the ability to protect a woman, because she actually needs that. Even if a woman might appear independent and like she can take care of herself. Like for example, me, I like to be able to take care of myself, and that's necessary, especially in this time and age. You have to be able to take care of yourself. But it doesn't mean that a woman does not need a man who can say, yeah, I can do this for you, and I can help you with that, and I can help you with that. So you shouldn't be afraid to show yourself as strong, and while also developing those other qualities like kindness, compassion, and all of that. So that way, less women will fall prey to these sorts of guys. And even in the movie industry, I think the movie industry has also played a role in pushing that idea. You see a lot of guys in the movies are displayed as, mean, and they have all these weird traits, and they're mean to the female lead in quote at the beginning, and then it's like after they fall in love, they suddenly become nice, and that doesn't happen in real life. Anyone who treats everyone in a terrible way, it doesn't matter whether he gets married or falls in love, any character trait that a man is not able to work on before he gets married, he's not suddenly gonna change and become a nice heavenly human being after getting married. And people might not realize that. So I just hope that we can have more guys who are, out there, strong, responsible, and kind. So less women fall prey to the
the thing is, bordering on that, actually, a lot of times people, like when you talked about some women who would go for the bad guys, mainly because of that strength and protective aura about them. A lot of times it's also a response to trauma as well. I've had cases where, because I'm also a therapist by training, I've had cases where a lady who suffered abuse as a child, she was neglected by her father, she was, not taken care of, she was often insulted all the time, he kept on degrading her person and all that. So when she grew older, she got attached to this guy who was abusive to her physically and emotionally as well. I think also sexually too. So, they were always, and then amidst all of that abuse, she was still, I love him, I love him, I love him. Usually when I'm counseling people, I don't ever tell people to break up with that relationship, no matter how bad it is. I don't, because I don't want a case where tomorrow, if I tell you to break up and then you break up and then somehow you walked out later in life, you're like, oh, we're an enemy of progress. so I just stay out of it. I might just make pointers and show you what's the reality of the situation is, what can happen, but you have to make your own choice. But I had to tell her, break up from this guy. Almost. Like, are village people pursuing you? Break up from this guy. So she now was able to, after a lot of, it was so bad that she literally would watch him have other women, So amidst all the health risk and all that, she was still like, but I love him, I love him, I love him. I'm like, you need deliverance, laying on of hands. So, but anyway, she was able to find the courage to actually break up in that relationship. So she got attached to this other guy who was very nice. Like he loved her. He would do anything she wanted. He literally loved her so much. He would do anything for her. And then she would tell me she's bored. It's
I
too
hear that a lot.
nice. Why is it too nice? And then that kind of stuff. And I said, and a lot of times that was simply because, that was just a response to trauma, right? She had become so exposed and used to an environment of abuse that became her natural expectation of life. I think I saw on Divorce Court one time, that program, a couple, I think the lady was complaining that her husband is too kind. He cooks for her all the time. He takes good care of her and the family. That a lot of times she expects him to fight with her. I mean, she expects him to shout on her, but he's never shouted on her before. He's always very quiet when she's arguing with him, and then he's always and then he cooks for her. He cooks like 4-course meals for her, and then she's getting fat, that kind of stuff. And then, so her complaints was that she's now getting fat from eating. Whenever she tells him to make something for her, he would just go all the way. So she was now angry about the whole thing. The judge had to say, "Woman, are you crazy? I mean, there are women who are just expecting their men to at least have a little bit of this, and a lot of times it leaves men confused because you don't know whether to be kind or whether to be aggressive. And then some men literally, put up a mask of strength, aggressiveness, just so they can appear strong and then woo any kind of woman they want to get. And so it's just a rigmarole of trauma, hurt people, hurting people constantly. Just that cycle that is a never ending way. So people actually need therapy, to be honest. They need to have their minds checked to see if what they are expecting or anticipating from the other person should be what they should anticipate, or is just their response to traumatic experiences from their childhood or happenings in their lives that needs to be worked on, so they can actually, you better just take some time off and then just heal. When you heal, that's not the time to go and they start giving social media advice. You tell you if they don't want this cut off, they don't want that cut off. That's often a response to trauma or not being healed. Just take some time off, get off, go heal, go through therapy if you need to. Take some time off. When you're done and you are fully in that right mental state to come back and take care of it, you can come back to it fully, and then you have your expectations refined, so you are actually realistic and not just living in some limbo somewhere.
Right. So I think we can talk a little bit about men and following their dreams. So even though today we talk a lot more about following your dreams and we have a more established sense of individuality as opposed to, back then when everyone just had, this sort of factory jobs and people were just expected to do the same thing. Now we have the idea of doing what you want and what you love. But even in a lot of, first world countries, I think there are less men who follow their dreams. And in my opinion, it's because of the responsibility that's on them. So let's say, even women as well, but I think it applies more to a lot of men, because when they have families, or even from when they're little, you're being told, okay, you need to be able to provide. Even if no one tells them, they can see that more women, gravitate towards the guys who have successful careers and who are in, some sorts of roles. And now they can feel that pressure to get established, to present themselves in a way that women would want to accept them. And, for a lot of women, even if you're in, men don't really place a value on you based on your job, you get. But for guys, it's almost certain that women will look at what you do before they look at who you are, like most women. And how do you tell guys to balance that out? How do they pursue what they want to do and still make sure that they are presenting themselves in a way that they'll be acceptable. I don't know if those two things are always going to be possible, but I just want to know your general opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a very valid question, a very important question actually, because that's a big issue. How do you follow your dreams and also be accepted as well, especially by most of what men do is reality of things. The reason men work as hard as we do is mainly for the women in our lives. Let's be honest about the whole thing. Men go out there and hustle for money just so they can take care of the men in their lives, to be honest. Hardly do you see a man who takes care of himself as he should be. Men hardly, a man can wear the same clothes for a long time, but it's the woman in his life is, is being taken care of. A lot of time, because that sense of caring for others makes us feel a sense of worth as a man. Now, in terms of following your dreams, I put it this way: what's the point to living if you really cannot live for what you were created for? If you were all meant to be here just to pursue, chase the bag, go after the Benjamin all our lives, and you get the money out of that, you get married and you get the money, and then one day you just die and then you go like that. That's it doesn't really mean so much. And I'm not saying you should not place importance on those things, on money and all of that kind of stuff, but really, if someone put it this way, if all you have is money, then you are really poor. If that's all you really have, you don't have not built relationships, you've not done anything significant with your life. So it takes courage to really follow your dreams. It takes a lot of courage to step out of the rat race. One thing I heard that changed my life was I was in a meeting with some older people. I talked to older people a lot, 80-year-old, 70-year-old. That might happen to be my friends. That my dad, my father's, what happened to my friends. So we talk a lot. They help me see the world. When a man has come to the end of his life, there are certain things that take that prioritizes. He begins to see that not everything is that important, and he begins to his priorities are readjusted really when it comes to the end of his life. So I listen to them a lot because in a way they give me perspectives of what I should prioritize really. So one time I was asking them, what do you regret the most in your life? And this older man was like, he doesn't regret the mistakes he made when he was younger. That's not what he regrets the most. What he regrets the most are the things he wished he did, but he never did. Maybe out of fear, out of uncertainty, out of the sense of what am I going to be able to provide for my family, that kind of thing. So that really stuck with me. That stuck with me. I had this discussion many years ago, right? That stuck with me till today. And so I'm always asking that question all the time. What could I possibly do that I'm not doing right now? Can I do better? Doing what I'm doing, whatever. So it takes a lot of courage to really step out of that mix, to be faced with the reality of the fact that sometimes you have to pay a price, make sacrifices, heavy sacrifices, and really go after something you really believe and dream, rather than just sticking with what's normal. It takes a lot of courage for you to leave your job or to think about starting something that they probably never see anybody else do. For some people, they are not celebrating because they are doing something way out of the ordinary. But some people, graduating from school is a big deal because they probably never saw anybody in their family graduate.
Yes.
They probably never had. So some things that they will celebrate, you feel like it's insignificant. Like, stepping out, going somewhere that your family members have never gone, just because you see something that really draws you in that area. So if you have a dream, it's gonna cost you. It's gonna cost you. Sometimes it's gonna make you feel weird. It's going to make you feel like you're making the dumbest decision in your life. In fact, the road to fulfilling your dreams is marred with isolation, with doubt, with disbelief, with insecurities, with fear, with uncertainties, with sometimes lack, especially in a country like Nigeria that doesn't really support dreams. You would have to, it's going to take courage, but the reality is that it's gonna be worth the while when you look back over your life and see the fact that there's going to be more fulfillment from pursuing your dream than sticking to something out of just safety and security. Now, I'm not saying just up and go quit your job. That doesn't make any sense as a person, but you should be open to taking calculated risk.
Yeah.
Because trust me, at the end of the day, it's not going to be the fact that you were safe that matters, but the fact that you took, something happened to me in school. My first year in school, I had this, before there was piggy vest and, those guys. I had this incredible idea. I was in my first year in school. I was going to help students save money, because I noticed that 70% of the income that students had, their money was spent on things they did not need. So I was going to help them save. And so I came up with an idea. I call it Save Max. That's save then max, maximum. And then the idea was that you're going to give me some part of your money. Maybe every week you're going to give me like $1,000 to hold for you, to keep for you. And then the agreement was that the first 6 weeks, you will not ask for the money at all, right? Then after the first 6 weeks, whatever, if you're asking for your money, I'm going to give you a form to fill, the 20-page form. And it's not a yes and no question. It is essay question where you're going to write, essays for me on what you want to spend the money on. And so the idea was that at least if you got to the third page, you'd be like, I don't need to spend that money.
Yeah.
Actually. So it was to discourage you from spending your money. And also going by the business model, because I had a partner, she was in Lagos while I was in Enugu. So we had a joint account. So that way, there was no way either of us could spend the money without us coming into agreement. So it was to discourage students from spending money. And I helped my roommates save about 70,000 naira in the first semester that we were there. Because we do like a test run to see if it's going to work. So word got out to the school that this was going to start. And I already had spoken to banks already. I was going to bring in incredible level of, money to banks. Because I had about 7,000 students in school. And just by my networking, when I was going to get at least 1,000 students on board. So it was going to be a phenomenal business. Only one thing stopped. I had customers already waiting to just get started. Like, Paul, guess when I started. Only one thing stopped me from starting. Somebody just told me, Paul, when it comes to money, it's quite risky. You probably might put yourself in harm's way and things may go wrong. So that fear of not wanting things to go wrong just made me I just stopped. I didn't proceed. I had people calling me, what's happening, Paul, start, and nothing happened. I just quit. Now, after 3 years after that, my final year of school, I was in an entrepreneurial pitch deck. And then I saw this guy, people were pitching up their ideas. And then this guy walks up. I can remember what he wore. This was many years ago. I can remember the exact outfit he wore. His shirt was starched, very well starched, and he was literally flying like Superman. You could put your hand on that shirt and to cut your hair, you will bleed. That's how starched it was. And so he walked in there and then he pitched the exact same idea. Everything was the same. The protocol, the process. The only thing that changed was that I called mine Save Max. He called his own Save Best. Man, when I saw that, I screamed. I was like, yay! That's how it was. So what I did not do, he went on ahead and did it. Since that day, I told myself. And it's still today, it's still my principle till today. If I have something I believe in to do, I will do it first, then think about it later. Because you can think yourself to the point of thinking yourself out of the idea.
Yeah.
You're over analytical. You just analyze, and you will always find something wrong with it. So it takes boldness for a man to, because you would be better for it when it's better you pursue it and you fail. Then you have that sense of fulfillment that at least you tried, than to have never tried at all, and then you just live with the regrets of what if I just tried. Sometimes you may have to just, it may cost you a little bit more time, because you have your family to cater for. You may have to like have a conversation with your spouse, carry them along, and tell them what you really are. You know, don't a lot of time men, we of course, because we just want to protect our family, we just carry everything by ourselves and never involve our spouses or talk to them about what we're doing and why it's important for us to get it done. So I believe with the woman you're with, she is for you. She is your partner. She's your friend. She's your sister. She's your wife. She's a part of you. So she wants to share in your life, share in your dreams. So don't just isolate your plans from her, but you can communicate and communicate it better to her. In a way, it helps you to see it in perspective, also to be more accountable as well, to make wiser decision when you can communicate to somebody else rather than you just doing by yourself. So I think, sometimes it might communicate and say, you know what, by doing this, it might mean certain amount of money I would have used for doing this, doing something regarding to the family. I mean, just take a little part of it and add to getting this thing done. You can communicate it well to her. She will understand well enough to want to even support you in making it happen. It's only when you are married to the wrong person that your life is a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're with the right person and you both have made a decision to go through this journey of life together, and once in a while you pivot, you just a turn, trying to just go in a different direction, and you communicate, right? You definitely would go in that direction together. But when you don't communicate, right, then that now becomes an issue, and they have all kinds of issues that go on. So yeah, so it's going to take you boldness, and like I said, you're not going to start up on something that you have. When you're doing about it, you're like, oh, this thing's going to change the world. I'm going to be a billionaire. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to do all kinds of stuff. And you find that in the first couple of years, you're still broke. And stuff still happens that, it's not really consistent with what you had in mind. But this thing, it's going to take tenacity. It's going to take you not just giving up to pull through. It's going to cost you everything, to be honest. Your dream will cost you everything. It will cost you your personality sometimes. It's going to cost you. But the thing is, when you go through the process, you'll be built up. Your character will be refined, grow. Your mental strength, you exercise mental agility, you'll be strong mentally and emotionally. Your leadership capacity will be enhanced. When you always will get better, to be honest, than just settling with status quo and then giving up on it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I tell men all the way, go after it. What's that can happen? It didn't work out. So what you learned, at least you tried. So go after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the fact that you highlight the communication aspect, because in the book you also talk about it, and I know that a lot of men struggle with communication. And part of that is you don't want to bother your family, you don't want them to be worried, so it's like, okay, I'll just handle everything on my own. But it's also a form of disrespect to those who care about you. And you see a lot of men have the highest suicide rate, and a lot of men end up committing suicide over things that probably could have been resolved, or whose impact could have been lessened if they had shared it with those that cared about them. And that's because they bore the burden to the point that they could bear it no more, and then they decided that, okay, all that's left is to seek death. So if you have an understanding partner, if you married right, and you decide, okay, we've walked this road for this long as a family, and at this point, this is what I want to do. I don't think there's anything that is beyond communication. And so many men just go off and then they try things and then it fails. Like a woman just discovers that they've run into a debt of how many millions, and she's like, when did all this happen? And it's like, okay, I didn't want to bother you. She's like, you didn't want to bother me? But now that the issue is here, the family has to deal with it together. So that understanding that the family is meant to, a couple is meant to be one body, and the family is meant to be one unit. They share both glory and fame. And okay, I'm talking. I'm sorry. I'm translating from Chinese right now in my head. Yeah, it's a popular Chinese saying, and right, I don't think it's gonna make much sense in English if I keep saying it. So, I mean, they share both will and woe together, and whether it's joy, whether it's sadness, a family will share all that together. And I think men need to be brought to the point where they can understand if you're married, you need to seek out the kind of woman with whom you can share these things. And if you realize that you cannot share these things with the person you want to marry, then you need to rethink that marriage, that partnership, because marriage is a partnership towards the kind of life that you want to live. And a lot of people, they seek out girlfriends. They're seeking out a nice girlfriend and not really seeking out a wife, a mother for their children, a partner for their future and their dreams, which is really not a good thing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree any better.
So I think we've been going for quite some time. This has been very, very interesting. I've loved this conversation, but I want to give you the space to just share anything that you feel we left out that you want men to know, or that you want women to know about men, whichever. And, talk about what you do and how people can connect to you. Of course, I'm going to leave all your links in the description, but just in case there's something you want to really point out to those listening, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So one of the things I like, for instance, this Saturday I'm having I'm speaking at a men's conference this Saturday. One of the things I want to talk about is I'm challenging men actually to fight back. And what I mean by that is this: men have to realize we're in a war. It's the war of the mind. There's many things going on that's wanting our attention to the point where they are redefining what family should be or what life should be about. And these things require that we are not just quiet, and just letting things go by. We have to come to the point where we literally have to resolve in our hearts that we would be men of honor. We would actually, what we did not see in our fathers, or we did not see in previous generation, or we don't have the opportunity or we mentored, to becoming. We have to stop giving excuses as to what you did not have, who wasn't there for you, who wasn't, did not raise you, who was, who abandoned you. Yes, your father left you when you were little or wasn't around, and that's true. And the fact that you could see the effects of that abandonment in your own life should be a reason why you should decide and resolve that your child will not have that same experience. So your traumatic past should actually fuel your resolve to do right, not the other way. And also, it's important for men to realize that you have to fight in this world. You have to, when I say fight, I don't necessarily mean fist fight. I mean, it's the war of your mind. You have to everything is taking your attention. Everything's taking your attention. Media, social media is going crazy. And everything right now is geared toward distracting the man and making men feel in less than they ought to have to be. They would have to get their minds reconfigured again, to seek help, to seek avenues of mentorship. You don't know it. The fact that you are experiencing certain difficulties should make you seek help in this area. Yes. If you realize that, for instance, you're having an insatiable appetite for women in a very unhealthy way, or you're needing validation in a way that is extreme and is out of order, should make you seek help in that area. So find men who are at the points where you want to be, and then humble yourself to say, you know what, I don't know this, teach me. I want you to teach me what it means to be a man. What can I do? How do I handle this? How do I handle my finances? How do I handle this and that? So seek to belong to a healthy community. If you're a man, you should be a part of the church. And around you have friends who can hold you accountable, who can challenge you, who can tell you the hard truth, the difficult truths. And don't just be the king of your own territory alone. Be accountable. Freedom without restraint is bondage in disguise. So it's important for you as a man to have certain level of strength, because you are a whole powerhouse. As a man, you have so much you can't possibly do. And if you don't restrict yourself in certain areas, if you don't have self-imposed restrictions and limitations, you can become like this. The way electricity works, the whole voltage that's released from the dam. If that voltage is released into a city, the way it can burn the whole city up. But what makes that voltage, that power current relevant in the center? You can use it to charge your phone, you can use it to light up your room and watch television, all that. It's because there's something called a transformer. A transformer regulates that voltage and makes that whole powerhouse usable. It makes something that is destructive, it makes it usable. So that's something that would have blown up the whole city now becomes useful because there's something called a regulator, a transformer. So the same thing with a man. A man is a whole powerhouse. He can do so many things, he can do so much, but he needs to have a self-imposed regulator to regulate his actions, to be accountable for when it comes to his decisions, how he spends his own money, how he spends his time. You can say, "Oh, I'm my own man. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do." That's the problem. If you have nobody you submit to or have any principle you submit to, you become an endangerment to your own self. Your health is compromised, your perspective to your family and whatever is in shambles. You get drunk and nobody can tell you nothing. Your family, it's going to be in a mess. So what we have right now are a lot of men who are living by how they feel, and living by how they feel, they make decisions based on their feelings or their moods, and that jeopardizes. And they'll tell you, "You know what? I don't feel happy anymore in this marriage, so I want to go."
Yeah.
I told you you have to be married for your feelings. You stay married because you made a decision to be married. Anybody that is successful get married, it's not because they always feel happy all the time together. In fact, the stats shows that the first 18 months of marriage, couples, they get to the point where they literally get irritated by each other. In fact, they hate the sight of each other after the first 18 months of marriage. So because there are three hormones in your body that makes you feel that sense of love and attraction. That's norepinephrine, serotonin, and then dopamine. So over the course of 18 months of being exposed to the same person, because prior to this time, probably we're dating by far. You're seeing each other once in a while, and then you see, and then you go, you see, and then you go. But now having to sleep on the same bed, wake up to each other's bad smell, and then see each other beyond the makeup and all that kind of stuff. After like by 18 months, you literally don't want to see each other at all. But what do you do to ensure that you keep it alive? You set up a structure, they call it structure of engagement, right? At first, you begin with passion. Then secondly, you set up a structure to protect your passion. That structure of what we must do to each other every day, how we must communicate, how we must settle conflicts. So the same way, you must have a structure of engagement as an individual, as a man, of things you must do to help yourself grow, become a better person, and all that kind of stuff. And also have a community of accountability, so you can report yourself to it and tell them what your personal struggles are. Let there be someone you look up to. How can you be a man and you don't have someone you look up to? How are you going to make it? How are you going to make it, really, if you don't have an accountability structure? So have that available, and then, be willing to fight. You're going to go out every day in the morning and go to work, and then just have to fight.
Yeah.
But it's important that, and it's important for women to also realize that men go through a whole lot that we don't talk about. So getting men to really talk, is important that you be his best friend. He may not tell you a lot of things because he's trying to protect you. Ladies, so listen beyond what a man says to what he's not saying, and then be there for him. Don't always, if you show yourself to always be nagging at little things that he does, that, let's say, he didn't, come home early, or something around the house that you didn't do and all that. I'm not saying you should not hold him accountable, but sometimes when you create an avenue where he cannot rest his head, he goes out and goes somewhere else to rest his head. There's a story about the man called Samson and Delilah. I say it this way. Delilah did not make Samson fall because she was the most beautiful man in the world. No, that was not why. There was nothing in that story that made it seem like Delilah was she had a voluptuous body that Samson could not resist. No, the reason Samson could fall because Delilah gave Samson a place to rest his head. If you notice, he was always sleeping when she was caressing his hair, trying to, whatever. So men are literally, see, the best thing you can be to a man is become a safe haven, safe space. He doesn't really care about your beauty. That's people, at least you miss it all the time. You think it's by changing your hair, doing the different makeup and all that kind of stuff. And that's what's going to make a man stay. Men don't even see it. Men don't even know you changed your hair. If you change your hair and you're like, and then you now get upset that he did not see he did not tell you you're beautiful. He didn't even see your hair. He has his mind in so many other things. You're changing so many things. So those things are okay. It makes you feel good, makes you wonderful, and that's beautiful. And you should be beautiful. But to be honest, men don't really see those things. But men, let me put it this way. Men don't cheat because the other woman was more beautiful than his wife. And I don't support cheating at all. I think it's irresponsible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in any way. I'm just pointing something out from study, right? I think cheating is horrible. Any man that does that should be ostracized, put in prison, jail, whatever, But from study, actually, it's shown that if you notice, some of the men who cheat, the women that they cheat with, are not even as beautiful as their wives. Do you notice? The wives are more beautiful than they are. So why do these men go? A lot of time because the woman outside gives them a place to rest their head, while they come back home to a very nagging atmosphere that just, because they fight outside, then come back home to fight again at home again because she's not giving a place to rest his head. So it's important that among everything you can be to a man, be it safe place, be it where he can rest his head, be his peace. That peace and serenity. I'm not saying you should not be yourself, but let him feel like this is home. This is where I can come to when I've exhausted and depleted all my energy outside. I want to come here to be refreshed. That applies everywhere, to your brother, to your dad, because a lot of times men are giving downward, but nothing comes upwards. Nothing is fed to them. And we think by giving a man food, that's okay. A lot of times a man just needs encouragement. He needs to be told that he's a great man. Like, use your mouth, right? Wield it rightly. You can. There's a, like T. Jakes would say, there's a king in every kid, and there's a kid in every king. So whenever you use your mouth rightly, you can actually feed the king in him, and to amaze what he will do, right? But if you use your mouth wrongly, you only feed the kid in him, and then he just begins to react some kind of way. So you have an important and powerful instrument, women, and that is your mouth. Use it rightly. Whatever you want to see in your man, feed him with it. I'm not saying you should nag him and say, you're such a useless man. No. Let him know he's a king. Let him know he's great. Let him know, he's seen. You see him. You see him, and what he's doing, you appreciate him of it. You see, and you applaud him for what he has become. And even though he's not there yet, but he's going to get there, he's on his way. When you do that, trust me, the man would trust you with his life. Men don't talk to their spouses or the people that they're closest to because they're not so sure about how they react. They can't really trust how they respond emotionally to it. So you have to let him know that you are the shoulder he can lean on, that he's safe with you. You have to use your mouth to say this thing. Let him know that you are his best friend, you are the shoulder he can lean on. He might act like he doesn't need it, but trust me, he thinks about it.
Yeah.
He goes back to his room and then he just thinks that word means the world to him. So men just want to feel safe. They don't need your money. They don't care about your money or whatever. Whatever you're earning, not that issue. People say men are intimidated by successful women. That's not the truth. No. Men just don't like to feel helpless. Don't like to feel like they are not needed. So when a woman is successful and then she meets all her needs and then doesn't create a need for him to meet, he feels useless. He feels, so what am I doing here? So that's why he might say, you know what, quit your job, whatever. It's not because he really wants any of that, because he wants to feel seen, he wants to feel needed and important. So you should create that avenue, where he feels important. Let him know. And it's not really about your spouse alone, but also your brothers as well. Your nephews, your uncles, that affirm their work. Let them know that they are great men and, they are going somewhere. And when you do that, it will amaze you how much they'll confide in, to be honest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. This has been a great conversation. Lastly, you can just talk about, your materials. So there's your book, and then talk about the other avenues or platforms you have to reach out to men and how people can find you.
All right. So I have an avenue called Heroes. Heroes is at Heroes C, then Heroes Connect. There's Heroes C that's going to happen to Covenant University every single year. We have about at the last count, we have reached out about 2,300 or something have gone through our program. So we have done that over time. And then I have an avenue called Glow. That's actually an avenue for women that I came up with to talk about, to respond to certain questions that women often have not been responded to. And so then I also go out, like this week I'm having an engagement where the title, the theme is Be the Light. It's on Godly Men's Ministry International. So I go on those speaking tours around schools as well. I've gone to now university many times. Did also to base university and so that's available. So so the thing called my film that I'm actually been working on. I've actually not. I also do podcasts as well on the redeemed. Myself and Emeka Ezera. So I go on that. I haven't started my podcast yet because of so many factors. I'm not ready for it yet because I'm actually so busy with my filming. But that's actually in the works as well. So I'm on social media. I'm terrible on social media, but I try my best to be there so it can be reached then through there. And also my therapy practice as well on wholeness consulting. I often I've never advertised before, but it's always a lot. I have so many that come in on a phone referral and all that kind of stuff. So through telephonic conversation as well as physical meets and then virtual sessions as well. So with clients that actually need some level of help in one way or the other, mentally and otherwise. So yeah, it's all.
Okay. So thanks a lot again. And thank you guys for listening. If you've listened up to this point, I'm sure that you've learned something because, Paul has dropped so many wisdom points here. And I hope that you can find it applicable in your life. And no matter what point you're at right now, maybe already married or, so many years have gone by in your life, it's never too late to start walking in the right direction. So don't feel discouraged. And if you're hearing this really early on in life, then, even better for you, you can start making changes to your life early. So I will see you all in the next podcast episode. If you want to get notifications about what's happening with my music podcast or, just get some free tips for a living from me, you can, sign up to my newsletter in the description. Check out all of Paul's avenues and reach out to him if you can and if you want to. And till next time, I hope you all stay happy and stay healthy. Have a wonderful time ahead. Bye.